there was actually a chance that someone else's religion would be the dominant one, could take power if freedom of religion was not enforced, right? It was not actually valued. Then everyone would get on board with it, right? So, and this is, and you can see this, like when I'm not a Satanist myself, but the Church of Satan, I guess, right? They created the statue of Bahamut. I forget the name of the demon, but like a demon
Baphomet,
statue,
right? Yes.
Yeah. And then they tried to add it on to public property, right, in which other religious symbols were allowed to be there, and then they were up in arms, right? Because I didn't actually mean it when I said like freedom of religion. I meant my thing, not your thing, especially one that specifically is there to troll me. Like.
Yeah, for sure. And if we're talking, and this is what's interesting, because I think if people really understood what the Satanists were trying to do in that sense, if they understood that it's just one big point to show that, hey, we're just as equal as you guys. We're trying to show why this church separation of church and state is a thing. I think that would appeal to more people, but like, it's because the word Satan is in there and because those connotations are there, it really throws people for a loop. Like, especially, you got to look at Facebook comments, because Facebook comments, people go crazy on Facebook comments. Whenever you see Facebook comments on news items like this, the top comments are always, well, I can't believe these Satanists are doing this. What does the world come to where we're allowing this? And, like, what they're doing is actually super fantastic. And I think more people would even be on board with that, but it's like a branding thing, which I think is really interesting. Joining me right now, looks like live, is Cyrus the Skeptic. Cyrus, can you hear us?
I can hear you perfectly fine. Can you hear me, Dan?
Yes, we do have a bit of an echo. We're going to try to work on that a little bit, but thank you, Cyrus, for coming on board. What's up, man? How you doing tonight?
It was a little interesting, considering that I got the call to come on here roughly 15 minutes ago.
Yes, and you are.
And I was in the middle of driving here. My hair is probably still wet.
But you took the call, Cyrus, and that's why you're on the show tonight, because you're a go-getter. You get the opportunities that are put out to you. I appreciate you being on tonight, bud. We're talking about separation of church and state, and specifically kind of the recent efforts of the. Now, I always get this confused. There is the Church of. There's the Temple Satanists. There's the Satanic Temple.
There's the Satanic Temple, and there's the Church of Satan.
And then there's the Church of Satan, and then one of the two is the ones that puts out the statues. And I always forget which one it is. But that's kind of what we're talking about, like how. Interesting it is that separation of church and state isn't as widely accepted as it probably could be, right?
So it's the Satanic Temple, I believe. That's the one that's a little more politically motivated. They're the one that have whereas the Church of Satan is a little more just the edicts of Anton LaVey is what you get with that.
Yes, right.
I did hear the caller that you had previously. I don't know if they're still the caller that's on the line right now.
This is Stan from Philadelphia. He's joining us tonight.
How's it going, Stan?
Fine. How are you?
I can't complain. So I do kind of agree with the with what Stan put out in the beginning, that it seems like if we had less of an overwhelming representation of just Christianity in the United States, then we wouldn't necessarily have this issue of church and state, because one of the go-to things that we almost always hear whenever we're hearing this conversation is, person A says, you want a theocracy. Person B says, yes, I think if we had the edicts of the church, it would be much better. Person A then responds with, oh, so you want a theocracy if it's your church. And person B says, yes, of course. But if we actually had a situation where there was a more even distribution of religions and also representation from religious nons, then that conversation would be a lot easier to have. But what we have in the United States is predominantly Christianity, so whenever the idea of inserting... there's a whole return that we have conservative Christian values as a concept here in the States, but we don't necessarily have that same concept for other religions.
Sure. And you know what else it is? And then I want Stan to join in, because I definitely don't, I want to include our callers in their conversation, of course, but it's just the label of Christian actually makes things super different. There's a lot of people that I've talked to who just assume that I'm a Christian just because I live in Texas. I'm generally a good person. And so that's kind of ascribed to me in some ways. If we talk about certain political candidates who will call themselves Christian, even though they don't go to church, they don't read the Bible, they are hardly involved in Christian community.
But they know that it's easier to get the vote.
But yeah, they just say, I'm Christian, and that's all. If they describe themselves as any other label, if they said, I'm not religious, I'm an atheist, whatever, then suddenly they would lose that vote. It's just the calling yourself, it's just the name that really kind of matters to people, which is frustrating. Like if Circe and I tried to run for president, or even Stan tried to run for president right now, people would look at our religious history and that would be an instant disqualifier.
Someone would look at my channel and see the amount of stuff the amount that I talk about religion and the amount that I talk about politics, and they would go, this is the last person we want here. Just like, yeah. Okay. So
they would look at that Yu-Gi-Oh poster on your room right now, and they'd be like, "Man, I'm a Pokemon guy. I'm sorry, I can't let you in.
Okay,
White House is closed." Dan. Look, it's not me, dude. It's the American public.
They're right there. They're right there.
Yeah. I see what you're saying. Okay, he's got, for listeners at home, he does have the Pokemon. All right, so look, you appeal to a broad audience. I understand. That's great. That's fantastic. Put that, that needs to be one of your...
But the problem is that we have an overwhelming representation of Pokemon, and we don't necessarily have an even distribution with you guys. I'm just making the exact same conversation we had before.
Yes,
but now it's nerdy.
This is fantastic. What a great direction this show has had. I'm really glad I've made the choices I've made to have this conversation up to this point in my life. So, Stan, final points about this conversation. Like, what do you think about, because we don't have the representation we should. We don't have the PR that we should sometimes as atheists. Like, what do you think we should do? Do you have any ideas about this?
That's a tough task. So what should we do?
Yeah, what should we do?
Well, I think. Well, first of all, just period. And this is from a person who's politically active, right? Like my biggest pet peeve is that other people aren't, right? Yeah. I'm not saying people have to be like a news junkie like I am, because I will spend 4 hours a day watching news, consuming, reading, and all that, right? And people got lives, so I get that, But there's complete lack of caring about the things that are going on around you, right? And it's not like these things don't have consequences. They have consequences all around, whether you realize them or not, right? A lot of things that are going wrong in your life, frustrations that society puts in your way, right? These can be dealt with, but it requires sustained effort, right, from a population. So what we're asking basically is that it's not that people who are not religiously affiliated are an insignificant amount of the population, is that they are not an active one generally, and they aren't focused, right? So when this issue doesn't have salience to them oftentimes, right?
Yeah.
There's other issues to them, even if they are politically active, that stand above it, right? Maybe if they're on the right, they're I care more about having my a right to bear arms protected, rather than, worrying about what happens with the First Amendment, right?
Sure.
And if they're on the left, they could be maybe worried about the environment or civil rights and all these other things, right? Yeah. Which are worthwhile causes, at least on the left. The idea of pushing the boundaries of the freedom of religion and making sure that's actually enforced, that's not a thing that people are thinking of. It's not the big problem in their lives, right? So it really is herding cats, right? But if we want to actually make any sort of progress on this, right, one, we don't have to go it alone, right? Because there are other groups in this country who are also marginalized, right? So we are friends in the Muslim community, right? These people aren't our enemies, right? But the society at large is looking at them that way, right? So I feel that's a place where we could reach out. We believe we should have freedom of religion and freedom from religion, right? Like, we don't think you guys should be oppressed either, right? So that's a natural ally we have there too.
Yeah.
And there are other groups as well, right?
Yeah.
Like, so we don't actually have to look at this as like a zero-sum game. Like, we can actually form partnerships, but it takes sustained effort. And like anything else political in this environment, it's hard, you know? Like, organizing.
We've got like, what, 18 candidates in the Democratic primaries. like there's so many to like even just pick from that if you're a Democrat and you're watching this, right? And of course, like, there's not, we don't have the luxury or the benefit of having a pulpit to preach from every Sunday to get kind of those messages across. Even here, the ACA, of course, is a nonprofit, and by extension, this show means I can't endorse any specific candidates. Not that I'd really want to, not that this is the kind of time and place for that. But even then, it just shows you like there's always going to be kind of these limitations as to what we would want collectively as a group. That I think a lot of people who are on the Democratic side kind of struggle with. This is interesting. This is more political than what I'm used to on this show, but I'm kind of enjoying the conversation. But any closing thoughts on this, Cyrus, before we move on?
So there is one frustration that I have, and it's that it seems that a lot of the right wing, the conservative side of politics, does have the benefit of being able to. What is it? It's not advertise, market themselves from the pulpit, as it were. There's a lot of times, especially I know in Texas, you've probably heard this over a dozen times. A politician says that, oh yes, I'm in politics because I spoke with God, and God said that this is what I need to do. It is God's will that I do this, which is really strange because whenever they fail afterwards, I can only wonder exactly how far God's will extends. But you don't hear that so much from the left. In fact, actually what I've seen a lot on the left side is that the left tends to argue a lot with facts and data and statistics and numbers, which doesn't necessarily mean they're always right, but it does mean, though, that the talking points that you hear from the left-hand side generally take a little bit of research to get into, whereas a lot of the talking points from the right do tend to be a little more intuitive. And therefore much easier to digest. And a lot of that comes down to the fact that their evangelical base is fine doing things on intuition a little more, which means that it's more convenient for them. They have to do less research and less study to figure out which candidate they want to go for. But that's really frustrating if you're on the left and going, no, please, everybody do your homework, be politically aware. Yeah. You're an adult, you're voting.
Yeah,
so,
for sure.
So serious. I like to say that, like, I really agree with what you're saying, and it actually dovetails with something Dan was saying earlier, and that, like, about the label of Christianity, right? Like, people are using these as cultural cues, right? Yes. Like, do you have these cultural cues that lets me know that you're a good guy, like, rather than me having to investigate your actual positions and or caring about what's in your heart or anything like that, right? So you say that. You're a Christian, right? Like, you say that, like, you are against this group and that group, right? Like, okay, that's my God, right? And what you were saying previously, like, they don't have to make these, like, detailed fact-based points, right? Like, they can just say, like, drop God in there a few times, and, like, it cues people up, like, okay, this guy is on our team, right? And I don't have to do anything else, right? Like, he's for the things I like, and he's against the people I'm not, right? And this is not something exclusively on the right. I mean, this happens on the left too, right? Like, like just say a joke against Donald Trump, right? And people will laugh and like, oh yeah, I like you now.
There's as many people. Right? And not to interrupt, but I kind of want to piggyback off that real quick. There does seem like there's as many people that were willing to vote for Trump because Trump makes people angry as there were who were willing to vote on Obama because of identity politics. It happens on both sides, and it sucks when it happens on either side.
Yeah. People play dirty all over the place. That's definitely not a question. But like it is going to take someone like me. You're going to have to dig a little bit more. You're going to have to write a little bit more than just share a meme with me on Facebook to convince me of something being true, right? But that is the result of, like, my education, and that is the result of, I would say, my my privilege of being to know the things that I know, that definitely a lot of people don't have, which is like another intersection of like how people are getting their information from. Are they getting their information from a pulpit every Sunday and on Facebook? Are they getting their information from CBS? Are they getting it from Fox News? Like, oh, look at that cat. Oh, that's amazing. Ah, that's a cute little cat. Listeners at home, Cyrus has a really cute cat, and it's definitely distracting me right now. But the point is, we also have to take a look and realize, like, oh, I am the result of the way that I am because of the circumstances that brought me here and because of the information sources that I have. And it could just be the result that people aren't looking at the same things as me, or they've been given the information wrong. You know, like I've definitely, when I was dissecting my own religious beliefs and I was looking at like atheist arguments and stuff, I found a lot of bad atheist arguments that like didn't, you know, swayed me at all.
I have a whole video on that.
And we know from research that like you can actually inoculate yourself from further beliefs if you're given bad arguments for something first before you're given better arguments, because your credibility for something, your trust in those kinds of sources is going to diminish if you continue to see information that doesn't, you know, align to what you think is true. So it's really interesting. I do want to get to some other callers, but Stan, hey, thanks so much for calling. Thank you for assisting me in my fall. But
no problem. And I would just want to say, Cyrus, I had never heard of you before, but looking in the background of your room, I can tell that you are exactly my kind of person.
He's a man of culture. He's a man of culture for sure. Yeah.
Fair enough.
Have a great day.
You too, Stan. That's why I love you, man. Like,
I will say that this studio doubles as a wonderful red herring, because whenever I've had, as somebody who's actually had somebody like an NIFB member actually took a picture of my face and put it on a target and just fired a gun at it repeatedly in a video on his BitChute channel, and like
lovely.
And his arguments all boiled down to, look at all the stuff in his office. And I'm like, I did a 2-hour live stream on you. You couldn't respond to any point I made. You were just like, look, this man has Pokemon. What a child. Like, okay, cool. I love the red herring back here.
I mean, yeah, like you have to comment on it. Like whether or not it's adding to your argument or not is a completely separate thing, but you can't not acknowledge it. I mean, you just got so much out there. It's really great. Serious man, how have you been? What have you been up to? What's going on, friend?
I've been kind of busy. You actually grabbed me. We had just gone to a water park. We have Six Flags membership, so we're allowed to go as many times in the year as we want, and it doesn't cost us anything outside of the membership price, which is nice because it also cuts down on food bills because food's included.
I remember one time Six Flags here in Texas. There's one in San Antonio, and the Jonas Brothers were there that weekend. I think
that sounds like the worst time to go.
Yeah, I think so. So we were there that weekend, and like obviously we didn't have tickets to the show. I think that was a separate thing. But you could like the fangirls. You could see them. They were all coming to the park, and you knew because they had the T-shirts and they had that sweet Hot Topic look that you just know that they're just and that's fine. Like more power to you. But like it's so funny how you could just identify people right then and there. Yeah. I guess 2006. That was a different time, right? Different time.
The other thing that is new that has happened is there is one room in our house that is currently inaccessible, and that is because a tree tried to go through it. Did you happen to see the pictures I threw of those? I did see the picture of that, and it looks like, you know, if Cyrus, one day someone's going to be like, look, this is evidence of God trying to like show you a lesson or something like that. Are you prepared for that? Are you like mentally ready for someone to? I'm okay with that, and my answer to them is going to be, look, I get it. I understand that tree branch came because it was like a 25-foot tree branch. Like that branch, huge. That branch came within 6 inches of my face through the ceiling. I get it, but all I would have said had it hit me is, this is the worst case of morning wood I've ever experienced. Oh my god. Shut it down. Close it down. This show's over. We can't go on. No, seriously though, I would just say God tried to send me like a tree assassin and I survived. Like, you know, you could frame it that way. Like, he loves you so much, sir, that he tried to kill you. It's just, you know, he works in mysterious ways. What can I say? He works in mysterious ways. He takes a rotten tree and he tells me, hey, you know evidence that you need to spend a couple $1,000s and cut that tree down? Here you go, buddy.
That's right. He was giving you a sign, and that sign was, "Hey, this probably doesn't comply with OSHA standards or some other code."
I mean, the worst thing is that on the right hand side, my house is there, so they can't fell it that way. On the back end, that's where the power lines are, so they can't fell it that way. On the left hand side, it's a large tree, so like it will spill in, even though we have a decent bit of land, it'll still spill into my parents' property, and that's where their buildings are. So like it can't go that way. So the one place they could possibly fell it is where my gas tank is. There's nowhere they can fell the tree. All of the cheap ways to get rid of the tree don't exist.
Because trees and gas tanks go together like bread and butter.
I don't want to see what happens when you take several pounds of like a giant cedar and just like drop it onto a gas tank. I don't want to know.
I want to know. I'm sure that's a YouTube video.
I've played enough video games to not want to know how many different ways you can blow up a gas tank.
I guess so. I mean, like, obviously not my gas tank, but I mean, yours is fine. So anyway, let's go to another caller here. I want to get to. So please tell me if I'm not pronouncing your name right. Is it Nguyen in California? Nguyen, you're on. Please tell me how wrong I am.
Oh, no, you're not wrong. You did pronounce my last name, but you didn't say my first name.
Oh, okay. I just had your last name on here. What's your first name?
It's Min, M-I-N-H.
M-I-N-H. Min.
Yeah.
All right, cool. Min, what's up, man? How's it going?
I'm okay, thank you. So the question I want to ask you and Suresh is, do you think that in our daily life, like there are certain truths that are more important to get a hold of, and and others are less important, or do you think it's important to know the truth of every proposition?
Ooh, what an amazing question. Are there a hierarchy of truths?
Are we talking? So when you're so by saying truth, and Dan, you opened yourself up to this by making your show name.
Of course,
Truth
I know.
You know you did.
I know.
So first, I have to wonder what definition of truth you're using, because it sounds to me like you're asking if there are certain axioms that people should be aware of or people should comport to more than others. That's what it sounds like, but you're using the word truth, so I want to know what definition of truth you're using.
Sure. Yeah, let's start with that.
I think truth is something that can be like verified with the physical world.
Mm-hmm. So like
I kind of feel like I reject that proposition. I feel like I reject that definition. Only because I view that numbers are a thing that are incredibly useful, and we use them in our everyday lives. There's a form of truth to numbers, but numbers don't comport to the physical world. I can't hold two. I can't hold one. There are abstract principles that I would view as true. They literally cannot comport to the physical world. That's the nature of them being abstract. I don't know if would adhere to that version of truth.
Man, there you go.
Yeah, so it's the thing is, because I'm not well versed in philosophy. So the way I see truth is like it's something that my senses can harmonize with the world around me and with other people, and I would consider that truth.
So a compatibilist view of truth, if I'm not mistaken, right, Suresh?
Yeah, that sounds a little bit like compatibilism. Sorry, my cat is granted, I'm a pragmatist, so my theory of truth is in flux usually. Though I am comfortable with Matt Dillahunty's "That Which Comports with Reality." I think it's kind of simplistic, but I also think that it's functional.
He's here in the studio, by the way, so whatever you say about him, he might fire back. I'm just letting you know. Just watch out for Twitter.
I mean, I do have to let him know that like I'm absolutely horrible at auto chess, but I am trying to get to rank so we can play.
Yes, and when it comes to priorities, Suresh knows what's up. So there you go. So like I guess I want to refocus back to the question. Do we have to prioritize certain truths? Because like we can't possibly the decisions that we make every day are based on information that may or may not be correct. But more importantly, we base it on experience. We base it on information that's not directly coming from us, it's coming from other people. I get information from newspapers, I get information from books, and that's going to, interpret how I do things in the world. And I'm relying on the expertise of other people who have studied things way longer than I have, in order to come to conclusions about things. And when you put all that in a big world like we have right now, and you start to see the complexities in the everyday decision making, even just like how we conduct ourselves in our daily lives, the simple stuff, whether or not you want to put shampoo in your hair today or tomorrow, like it's simple decisions, because we read about things, we see something in a tabloid that says, oh, we need to do this and that. And so, like, how do we prioritize that? I think is a great question. Like, and I believe, Min, I think this is what you're getting at. Like, what do we do to kind of rail that down?
Is it maybe that so no truth exists, and I would say based on the way that he is phrasing truth, that no truth exists in a hierarchy. Like all truth is it's either propositionally the case or not. However, what you do with a particular truth, there's where the hierarchy is. How important the principle of entailment basically is what I'm getting at. How important the entailing factors to any particular truth are based on his definition. Those seem to be probably the things that would actually exist in a hierarchy. So all things that are true would exist in their own little bubble, but how you comport yourselves to those things, which could vary based on your profession, could vary on your political alignment, could vary on any number of things, there's probably where the hierarchy sits.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, like I'm going to instantly believe, I mean, if you showed me 3 stories from like ABC, NBC, and I don't know, another commonly considered reputable source, and you show me another story that's only being reported in, I don't know, conspiracy theories or something. Yeah,
like Breitbart or InfoWars.
Yeah. So like that's going to affect the way that I understand that truth, right? That knowledge, because I have a pre-existing notion of the credibility of those sources, right? I have an idea of the truthiness of those things, and quite frankly, for some of those examples that we just talked about, some of them aren't as great. Now, that doesn't mean that those other sources can't be wrong. It's just that we put a higher credence into that.
Even a broken clock is wrong. Even a broken clock is right at least twice a day.
Right, but that's an example
of military time.
Of the organization of how I understand truth in the world, right? I have a fundamental trust higher in those news organizations and institutions that do that kind of stuff every day, rather than people who I know and have proved in the past to have, certain agendas or biases or other kinds of things hiding them. Min, we've been talking a lot. What do you think about this?
Let me give you, maybe I should narrow down a little bit so you may help me find the answer.
Yeah.
So one thing I noticed that most people, including myself, are trying to live up based on a Maslow hierarchy of needs.
Mm-hmm.
So the people they want, and I think at the basic needs and psychological needs, religions are absolutely not necessary. When it comes to self-fulfilling needs, where we realize where we are in the universe, what is the meaning of our lives, and how do we function in this world, I think religions play a role. And of course, some people don't need it, but many people do, including myself. So even though I'm not, crazy, like religious, like fundamentalist, but I do hold certain spiritual belief because it helped me get to that step and live my life in a way that's productive and, beneficial to other people. Therefore, if you ask me, do I really examine my beliefs to the point that I can verify with empirical evidence? I would say no, because it makes sense to me. It helped me, harmonize with the world around me and help me become, a productive person in the world, and I'll follow it.
Yeah. So,
but ultimately, you and I, both, we want to get to the top of the Maslow pyramid, right?
Yeah. Can I ask you? I gotta ask you though, man.
I actually already have a contention with that.
So this is my thing, right?
Yeah.
Is it possible for a belief to be productive and helpful and useful, but also not be true?
Yeah, I think it's possible. Yeah.
So can I ask you, like, if it sounds like your beliefs are super helpful to your life, and I'm super glad that you have those
Do we
beliefs
have
that
a
are
fellow
helpful.
pragmatist on the call? What?
But can I ask, like what reference are you using to know that your beliefs are true outside of their usefulness, or do you have any other way of knowing?
Reference. I would say it's, because my belief is sort of like it's, the only answer I can give is like it makes sense when I use it to examine certain things in my life, and therefore I hold on to that belief. But I cannot produce like evidence like the way like I can give like I cannot produce in a lab for you to check it.
Sure. But can I ask you this?
Inside your mind.
Yeah, no. This is fantastic.
Yeah.
If I were a Muslim, or maybe a Muslim who would come to you and say, well, this belief kind of makes sense to me, and I can't really show it to you, but under my understanding of the world, I think this makes sense to me. Does that make Islam any more true than any other kind of religious belief?
I would say no. I don't think so.
So if this is the case, and we've kind of established this, then how can we know for sure that your belief is any more true than any other belief?
Yeah, I mean that's the thing, Dan. But I don't really know.
Okay.
But like I said, I guess because it's sort of like it helped me resolve certain problems that will prevent me, from reaching to the self-fulfilling needs of the pyramid. So, therefore, to me, that's more important than actually whether that belief is correct or not.
Interesting. Yes, the usefulness of the belief is actually more important than its truth.
That is actually pragmatic theory. That's pragmatic theory of truth right there, is that and granted, I don't subscribe, I'm a pragmatist who doesn't subscribe to the pragmatic theory of truth, but that's literally pragmatic theory of truth, is that the usefulness of a particular proposition is more important than its truth value.
Yeah. So, well, first I want to say, Min, thank you so much for talking with us today and being so genuine with talking about your beliefs and stuff. I mean, that's awesome that you're here. I want to get Suris's take on this, because Suris, I mean, you and I have had conversations about this before, even, I think. But I know you've talked about this on your channel. So, like, what's your take on this so far? Do you have any commentary?
So, and my point may be a little. Sorry, Min.
What's up, Min?
Yeah, I'm sorry. Sorry. I just want to clarify something with you. So,
Sure.
The first question when I asked you, more is like certain truth are more important than the other, because we cannot survive in this world if we don't live. Like we don't live with like we don't correspond correctly with the reality, right? So the reality that people they want to meet their needs, like the safety needs, and then they go up higher, to live fulfillment. Like that's the biological reality, right?
I see that.
I get like certain that's the thing that everybody have to live up to, otherwise we will die. So I guess like that's why the means or the vehicle that help people get there, I think it's up to each person. So that's why I don't really concern,
So
if the vehicle is actually correctly built or not.
Sarah, go in on this.
The reason, the contention that I have is, and granted, I can understand the point you're making. This actually, the idea that like what can be gotten out of a particular proposition is more important than whether or not it's true. This is literally a center idea in politics. So that's a fun joke on politicians not being trustworthy. But anywho, my point of contention was actually on a statement you made about Maslow's hierarchy of needs. You said something, correct me if I'm wrong, to the effect of us attempting to climb our way up the hierarchy of needs, correct?
Yeah.
Okay. So and again, it may be a little pedantic, and Dan, step in if you think that it is. But my contention with that is that that's actually not what the hierarchy of needs is for. So when Abraham Maslow proposed the hierarchy of needs, it was in a paper, 1940s. I want to say 1943. It was in a paper about human cognition and human behavior, and in that paper, he didn't say anything about us wanting to climb our way to the top of the pyramid. He viewed each stage of the pyramid as a category, a schema, not schema, just basically a category of motivating factors. So at the bottom, you have physiological motivating factors: food, water, warmth, rest. Afterwards, you have safety motivating factors, personal security, like whether or not you're living in a good neighborhood that doesn't have a chance of killing you. I grew up in a ghetto, so I'm kind of familiar with that. Then afterwards, you've got like belongingness, where you've got intimate relationships and friends. Once you've got your base needs, then you have to worry about the other needs. But it's not about trying to climb up the hierarchy, because at the top of the hierarchy, you have like self-actualization, which is something that some people may need religion for. I'd argue that they don't need it, but that may be what allows them to self-actualize. But the idea behind the hierarchy is not to climb up the pyramid. It's that the pyramid just exists as basically as a diagram to show you, like, these are your base needs. Once you've gotten these base needs settled, many people, not all, but many people, after getting their base needs, will find that they end up wanting something else. It's not about climbing up to self-actualization as a goal. It's about, this is just a base thing about reality. Once you have food, water, and shelter, you end up needing secure and safe shelter. Not that you're actively trying to pursue all the way up to self-actualization.
Yeah. I want to bring a metaphor into this. And I think back to my days in public school. Like in public school, there's all kinds of rules about dress code and stuff like that. And whether or not, like, you actually agree with that dress code, whether or not you think it's a good idea or not for everybody to be wearing the same thing, you do it anyway because you have to. In order to go to school, in order to get that education and move up in the system, you have to adopt that. Just because, like, we have to adopt something to survive, or if it's even advantageous for us to do it, doesn't necessarily mean that it's a good idea, or in the case that we're talking about, it's a true idea. I think there's plenty of people around the world, absolutely plenty of people around the world, and including yourself, Ben, and for myself too, by the way, a few years ago, like, where my religious beliefs actually helped me create a narrative for myself and create a sense of purpose and a sense of orientation in the world of what I wanted to do. And slowly over the years, that narrative kind of fell apart for myself. But if you want to survive in a country, not even here, I'm talking about countries where the majority of people are super religious and you have to conform to certain standards, you also have to conform to those beliefs. Just like when you're in public school and you have to follow, you got to follow the masses in order to survive, in some cases literally to survive, because there may be some sort of death penalty for you if you don't. And in that sense, yes, I agree that, like, you have to conform, but
it's more about comporting to it as opposed to anything else.
In a society where we can be as free as we can be here, at least in the United States, to express ourselves and to find truth, and whatever that means, in whatever capacity we can, no matter how hard it might hurt us, even socially with people. For myself, I've determined that that's better for me, to figure out whether something is true, even if it hurts. But I appreciate your take on this, man. I think it's been really interesting. Any other thoughts on this conversation?
So even if you had to resolve, the conflict with your Christian family and friends, but I mean, at least you still achieve the beside your basic needs, you still able to go. You're still able to obtain the fulfillment needs, right? And you realize where you are in the universe.
Yeah,
what is
but
the meaning of your life?
It's interesting because for me that took the place of like doing a show for the ACA and going to conferences and hanging out with other people who are also secular. Like, in a way, like, that kind of filled the time that I was spending with religion and still talking about religion, just on the other side of the fence. So yeah, in that sense, I kind of figured it out for myself. And that's not going to be the path for everybody. Some people, they just figure it out and they just, they just do their own thing. But for me, I just find it interesting to have even these conversations, just like we're having right now, man. Like, that's definitely fulfilling for me.
Yeah, so that's why, like, in my life, like, that there are certain situations that when I'm not really good at using logic to resolve it. So the only way that I'm able to resolve, I have to let I guess like my subconscious mind work it out somehow. And the only way that I'm able to do that if I read, like certain story or parables or, myth. Because in my religion, there's many of those things. And somehow, I don't know, when I encounter a moral dilemma that really taxes my psyche, it tends to alleviate that more quickly, and it can help me find solutions better. So I don't have to wrestle with it too much. Therefore, that's why, and it maintains my tranquility, I guess. Therefore, it's important for me to, to engage into that.
Yeah.
Yeah. Go ahead. Sorry.
So there were two things. I actually kind of like that take where sometimes parables are easier for figuring out a moral dilemma than something else. For instance, me as opposed to a parable, I may resolve something in like a thought experiment where I'll say, imagine this scenario that's functionally identical. However, like one or two factors have changed. This is kind of like constructing a trolley problem, but I'm also really into philosophy, so stuff like that appeals to me more than a parable. But for you, a parable may appeal more, and then to somebody else, I know a few people that may not like thought experiments or parables. However, they like breaking things down into mathematical logic. So for each person, there's going to be a different way that they handle a moral dilemma, and I can get that, and that makes sense. But I guess my question here would be, would those parables still function in every way outside of their religious scope? For instance, let's take if we were to take the Good Samaritan or something like that from the Bible. Does that story function outside of its religion? I'm personally think that it functions perfectly fine outside of being solely in a religious sense. I don't think that the religion's even necessarily needed so much for that parable to function and still be useful.
Oh, I see. So if you want to ask me if I actually have to believe in the tenet of the religion to enjoy the parable, no, not really. But I do think that religion, they do provide a certain framework that if I don't accept the whole thing, but I have to accept certain premises in order to, to figure out what the story means. But of course, I don't just, sit down and think about it, but I just read it and then you let it, sink in my mind and eventually I usually can find out the answer. But only when the situation comes up. But, so, yeah, because I don't think logically very well when certain proposition, for example, like abortion, I used to be really against it. But I came to, reconciliation with the issue. I have sympathy for women who seek abortion, not because of the logic that many people from the atheist community argue about it, but because the story I read from my religion, Buddhism, it helped me realize that what important is, and I reconcile that. So, and it's like it calmed me down. It just put me in a Zen mode, so I can think, more compassionately and empathetically. So, if you want me to think logically about it, I don't know how I can do that because the abortion issue is really like highly emotionally charged issue. So I don't know how to resolve it with logic. If I can, then I would be an atheist by now.
Well, you're really hitting me right now because I too was once kind of on the other side of that abortion debate. And when I also heard some of those stories and that empathy was kind of switched around, I did start to change my mind on it. And that's not necessarily a bad thing, right? I think one of the biggest...
Yeah.
Just these logical people, we just use logic for every single thing. And we don't often realize that like that emotional reasoning, those emotional responses actually play into our logic a whole lot. We make tons and tons of laws and rules because our feelings play a part in how we interact with the world and how we socialize ourselves. If you were kids in school and like if you want to bully somebody, like even we're going to stop that. Even if what somebody is saying about something is true, like you still don't want that kind of behavior to happen because like, oh, we understand, like we want to protect the feelings and the egos of people who are, trying to express themselves and trying to grow in the world is just as much as anybody else. And again, like we could talk about like what's actually true when we're like insulting people. That's kind of a separate thing. But like, I do want to say like you can definitely still be an atheist and still have emotional arguments to believe that abortion should be more accessible for women. Like, I think that's okay. It's okay to, as long as you acknowledge, right, that it is an emotional argument, then that's something that we can work with. Instead of, we don't have to throw it to the side and say, well, this is completely emotional and it doesn't really work. And there's other situations where we do the same thing. Yeah, for sure. What's up?
I mean, correct me if I'm wrong, but if a person had to argue from emotional view, then I guess from your perspective, it's not rational.
If it's pure emotional argument, yes, I would say yes, absolutely. But I can even tell you right now, if we're going to talk about abortion, like I do think that there are other reasons outside of our emotions why we should allow.
I'm actually heavily involved in this particular debate. So
yes, you are.
This is one of those ones that like, if you wanted to have an entire episode on it, I could do that.
We really should, because it's a complex issue and a more emotionally charged one than some other kinds of issues for sure. Honestly, I mean, we've had this call going for a really long time. I would suggest, look into Cyrus's stuff actually, because he does, if you're interested specifically in logical arguments in regards to abortion and access for that kind of care for women and stuff, Cyrus is a great resource for that. But sorry, I'm trying to wrap things up here because we have been talking for a while. I do want to say, Mint, like, thanks so much for talking. Like, could you call back into the show? Because like, I'm pretty sure you're the first Buddhist that we've talked to on the show. And we definitely need those more conversations to be more diverse. I've really enjoyed today.
Yeah, sure. Cool. Yeah, thank you so much for taking my call. So I just want to say that, I really like you guys, and especially because I am, when I left the rigid practice of Buddhism, my mind is not like, an empty space. It's like a vacuum. So it had to fill something else, something healthier, I guess.
Yeah.
Therefore being an atheist is not an option for me, at least not at the moment. Because I see that American atheists, they are so logical, and I'm not like that, because there are certain things in my life I have to engage with my emotion, my feeling to resolve it. And religious text, religious story help me resolve it in a way that is productive, that logical reasoning does not.
Well, listen.
Maybe because I'm not capable of doing that right now, I guess.
Let me tell you something. There's a logical atheists out there. They exist. They're all over the place.
Many of them are in my comment section. I did one video about like and a couple follow-ups as well, about some of the worst like counter apologetics.
Mm-hmm.
And when I did that video, I hear a lot of echoing. That's weird. But when I actually did that video, one of the points that I made was that nobody should say that religion is a mental illness. Like, that doesn't work. There is nobody that has ever said, "You're right, my Christianity is mental illness. It's gotta go." Like that's not a thing that happens. You're not gonna do anything useful when you do that, and you're spitting on people who actually do suffer. My comment section actually got a lot of people that were like, "No, it is. Look at the definition of delusion in the DSM-5," and I'm like, that's not how this works. Stop.
Yeah, so like, and the other thing I would say is, before I even took on the label of atheist, I used other labels. I was like Christian mystic or even Christian atheist. Those are labels that people use, that even though they're not as common, they have been written about and talked about. And maybe like, it sounds like to me, maybe Buddhist atheist is something, I don't know.
Actually, atheistic Buddhism already exists as a concept.
Yeah, but just saying like, it doesn't have to be a binary necessarily for your path at this moment right now. It doesn't have to be, well, I can't be atheist because X.
Yeah, because atheism is just your response to the proposition of God. Like, that's it. Like, theism and atheism are both just two sides of the coin to your proposition of God. Yes, theism, no, atheism. Buddhism doesn't necessarily by itself entail God belief. There's just other spiritual concepts in it. So and there are atheists that have a religion. I mean, heck, earlier on the show we talked about Satanism. Satanism is an atheistic religion. So
yeah, that's true. Anyway, man, just to wrap it up, because I keep saying we're going to do it, but like, just find a label that works for you right now. Good luck on your path. Thanks so much for calling. I'd love to hear from you again.
Okay, thank you so much, Dan. Thank you, Cyrus.
Yeah. Well, let's see. Talk to you later.
Thank you.
What a great call. I enjoyed that.
Very enjoyable one.
I love that, because here's somebody who has way different beliefs than what we have. And yet we're still, I mean, not completely different, right? We're not talking about somebody in an evangelical camp or something, right? We are talking about someone who is.
It seems like us and men would probably agree on like a lot of the same fundamental axioms.
And you know what?
We just have different ways of getting there.
Yeah, like, you know, it's the details that gets people hung up in these kinds of things usually. And that's where kind of the arguments start. And that's where like the derision comes from sometimes. I think like, even though like, you know, we may not have seen the kind of progress in a conversation that you or I would have wanted to see based on what we believe. Hopefully, and I'll be thinking about some of the stuff he's saying to me too, because it reminds me of other kinds of things. But hopefully, like that's just a step in like a progress for someone, whether it's for me or it's for men, of us like trying to get somewhere where we can honestly say, yeah, I'm living a life where I think I'm doing it based on truth. I think I'm doing it based on something that's reasonable, something that that I can, you know, hold a candle to. And that's awesome. I love that. So yeah, good stuff. I do have some other callers. You want to talk to some more people, Cyrus?
Absolutely.
Oh. Okay, cool. Let's go to John in Arnold, Missouri. John, how's it going?
It's going very well, thank you.
Cool, John. What did you want to talk to us today about?
So I called, I think it's about 5 months ago now, and I believed a bunch of nonsense at the time. And I think I've kind of sorted it out. And I today would describe myself as an atheist and an anti-theist.
What were you before, John?
I've been an atheist for most of my life. There was a period of time where I would have called myself a humanist Christian, or like, because when I called in last time, I was really convinced that magic was real and that Jesus was magic. Mm-hmm. And at this point in time, I think I'm more comfortable with the idea that magic may or may not be real, but I'm going to live my life as if it's not, because I don't have enough evidence and it doesn't seem to have any impact on the world around me.
Wow. Hey, John, I got a message from somebody, I believe it was last week, that came into the studio and handed me a note and said, here, this is from John. That was from you. Okay, wow. So, like, was our conversation a part of your change in your beliefs?
So our conversation definitely helped a lot. And then part of it was just like hitting at like a pretty hard rock bottom as well. So like after I hit that rock bottom and going back and like listening to the recording, and it's just like hearing the questions you were asking and like not having good answers to any of them. It's just like, man, how did I get so deep down the rabbit hole? And I think that the answer to that question upon reflection is just that if you walk around the United States saying positive things about Jesus Christ, people are just going to like go along with it. And it like feels really good.
Yeah. So, man, okay. Wow. So many questions.
Like, especially for me, like, after, like, I was going through a divorce. I had a violent interaction with my father. My mother wasn't speaking to me. I was going through a lot of different stuff. And it's just like, all right, basically everyone I encountered was just like, whoa, well, church will fix your problem. I was just like, all right, I guess I'm not being intellectually honest if I don't at least try. And it's just like, I had a good friend who reached out to me through social media and was just like, hey, I'll take you to my church. And it's just like, all right, fine. I'll give it a chance. Like, what's the worst thing that could happen?
Man, could believe in things that you don't believe in anymore. I think that's one thing, right? Wow.
Well, I mean, in retrospect, I don't know. Like, I'm not angry with the person that took me there. Like,
sure.
They wanted to help me.
Yeah.
That experience was generally positive. Like, I felt really good. Like, I was obviously, because like if you're a mess at church, or at least at this church specifically, people are just like, oh, well, you're in the right place. Like, we're here. Like, we want you to get better. We want you to be supported. We want this and that. Whereas like in the previous setting I had been, it was not supportive at all. Like, and one thing that I thought was really interesting from the previous call was the mention that the thought that religion is a mental illness. But I think what's also really dangerous is the kind of a reverse of that, in that I think that sometimes theistic people look at atheism as the mental illness.
Yeah, that's definitely true. That is 100%.
And do you know what's really terrifying?
What's that?
Being involuntarily committed to a hospital, having a theistic doctor that thinks that theism or atheism is a mental disorder.
Oh, no. Are you telling me that's what happened to you?
Oh, God, I wish it wasn't.
Oh, wow. Man.
So, yeah, basically, it was a pretty dreadful experience. But where I am now, like I go to work, I work out, and like I'm trying to like just meet new people and rebuild my social group. So like I have my basic needs. I have a place to live.
Yeah.
I have income to pay for all of my needs, and like I'm just working on like self-actualization.
Yeah. Hey,
so I know you said you had questions.
I was gonna say, well, I don't know if the audience mic is on. If it's not, I'm gonna do it anyway. I just want a round of applause for this guy right here. I guess the mic's not on. That's okay. Oh, there it is. John, that's amazing to hear. I'm so glad you're in a better place now. It brings me back to my own story and how I kind of ended up the way that I was. And it's so interesting that even though, like, we just talked about how emotions can sometimes be separate and also a part of our beliefs, well, you just told me a lot of what you were feeling at the time and what was happening to you emotionally. And I think that's so interesting that you share with me those details, because that still played a part in your beliefs. Like, and for better or worse, that's a part of your story and that's part of who you are. And I think I wish people just acknowledge that more. You know, if we could just be more honest about, yeah, like, stuff happened to me, and that's kind of why I believe the way that I do too. Like, that's okay. Like, I think is it okay in every single situation? Absolutely not. But it's better to acknowledge it than just to say it's not there, right? I don't want to talk too much. I want Cyrus to kind of pipe in on this, because this is really interesting.
So I agree that it's important. Like as an example, I grew a lot of my positions on things do come from a perspective of somebody who grew up incredibly poor. My personal experiences are a part of that. I also grew up in a very violent neighborhood, so most of my personal experience is going to be based on that. And then when I deal with evangelical Christians, the fact that I grew up as a young Earth creationist means that a lot of my arguments are going to come from, no, I understand where you're coming from. I was you for 18 years. Stop it. Hold on. Here's this information.
Cyrus wore this shirt unironically.
Yes.
Controversial. It was amazing.
So I actually... I completely understand the concept of all your experiences that you have around you, kind of like tailoring your approach to something, and then realizing maybe like a year or two later, I know that here it's like 5 months down the road, where you kind of look back at your other experiences and go, actually no, I was responding that way because of things that were going on at the time. As an example, we had we were doing a stream on the abortion bill that was happening in Georgia, and because the stream already had me a little heated, shortly after me already being heated, Matt Powell comes on the stream, of all people, and my response to him was not the same as it is in normal. Normally my response to Powell is just to kind of like laugh and go, yeah, no, you're here and you're making a fool of yourself and you could probably stop. This time I was like going, get in my Discord, let's have a chat, I would like to throat stomp you. And I recognize, like, after the stream, I'm like, no, I was actually just really angry at the time, and that's why I let all of that out. So I don't have much comment aside from just like pure empathy. I understand where you're coming from. I've been there.
Man, like I did say I had questions, but like honestly, I could ask a billion questions about your experience, John, because and I'll never get to the heart of it. I know that. I know that's going to be up to you and how you tell your story and how it goes. But I do just want to know, like, do you feel like you're at a place now where your beliefs are as dependent on your emotional state, your hierarchy of needs? Do you feel like you've met those needs now and your beliefs are separate from that?
So I think so. Like, honestly, I know what I need to do to not die, and I feel like that's like the most useful thing I can do. Like, if I work out, take care of my body, take care of my mind. That will give me a long, healthy life. And like, that's what I want. I want to have a long and healthy life. So I'm actively doing things to ensure that happens.
Sweet.
And just like things that work, like exercising works for me. Jiu-jitsu works for me. And like work is just a thing I have to do, like, because I'm not bored rich.
Yeah.
Yeah. So the thing that was really frustrating for me is just like, I felt like for the first time I was like achieving self-actualization. Like, so I went from just being atheist moving to anti-theist, and my main motivation was that my future ex-wife wanted to move to Utah. It's like, all right, Utah, Mormonism. That's not super great. I'm not a big fan of Mormonism. I think that that's something that would be especially if I'm going to be there. Like, I feel like I should actively oppose this because I think that it does harm.
They do have the Bible Christmas special, though.
The Bible Christmas special. I've never heard it called that before.
Okay, look. If the Torah is episode 4 of Star Wars, then the Bible would be The Empire Strikes Back, and the Quran would be Return of the Jedi, and this little thing would be Star Wars: The Christmas Special.
See, I've seen that meme, and it's always been Spaceballs is what the Book of Mormon.
I don't. Okay, look. The difference here is that Spaceballs is a respectable piece of media.
Oh God. Yeah, that's what I need right now, sirs. I need all of the Mormons to come attack me on this show. That's what's going to happen next. No, but seriously, yeah, the anti-theism thing that's a separate issue entirely. Like, what I know, man, I don't know if I want to get into that right now. What I want to keep asking you just a few more questions, or just at least just have these conversations, because like it's, people do email me sometimes and say, "Oh, I'm glad we had this conversation and stuff." But it is interesting to see, like, oh yeah, I did change my mind on this thing, like, and there were reasons for that, and while you're able to recall those reasons now, I would just love to just examine that with you. So, like, you had a belief about Jesus and magic and stuff. Like, can you kind of explain what that was and like why you don't like have that belief anymore?
So basically, I had this really unfortunate experience involving a mental hospital, which I have a lot of problems with, and I'm hoping to eventually, like, I feel like if I do normal things long enough, I'll hopefully be able to hire a lawyer and have some kind of recourse with these actions, because it felt criminal experiencing it. And then just like after going through that experience, it's just like, I so understand zealots now, like religious zealots. It's just like, you go through this traumatic experience and like, it doesn't break your beliefs. It just makes them stronger. It's just like, I'm definitely right. Everyone else is wrong. Mm-hmm. I just need to make them understand. That was kind of where I was. So then I was going to like I went to a couple of different churches, and it's just like with the music, and then like also just like all the memories from childhood. It's just like, I know all these songs, like these songs make me feel good. I feel good in church. Like there must be something to this. Like all these people are getting clean and doing this and doing that. And it's just like, maybe they're right. Like maybe I just didn't open my heart enough.
Been there.
Meanwhile, I get all of those same feelings by being in a card shop playing Yu-Gi-Oh, and I've seen people turn their lives away from drugs because they wanted to play card games. Therefore, the efficacy of turnaround is there in card games as much as it is in religion.
Yeah. Oh, gosh. John, yeah, and people don't really realize that, like, churches have a target audience. Churches have a target market in their messages, like just like any other form of business that like wants to recruit people. And I'm not saying that every single church has malicious reasons in doing that, right? But I am saying that, like, look, when the lights are dim and the youth pastor's got the acoustic guitar out, and he just and there was just a message about how, yeah, you shouldn't be looking at porn because that's like not a thing you should be doing. You feel guilty because you just did it last weekend, you know, and like that gets to you, and like that's the kind of thing that gets people into this, for sure. I mean, we see it all the time. It happens every single week.
It's just marketing 101, just with a religious spin.
Yeah, for sure. And like, I am so sorry that you were like a victim of that. I mean, really, you're a victim of that. And some of your state at the time was preyed upon by people, and again, maliciously or not, I'm not sure. It sounds like that you're very forgiving of the people who eventually brought you into that, and I'm happy. That but
I don't think that I definitely interacted with people that behaved maliciously because I was convinced that I was convinced that everything was just going to work out. It's just like, all right, I don't need to worry about the consequences of any of my actions, so I'm just going to do whatever I want all the time forever. And eventually that could get you into trouble when you have credit cards. So it's not like catastrophic or anything. I'm going to be fine. But like, I definitely encountered some people that did take advantage of my state of generosity. And like, some of them were people that were in need. So like, maybe they're not like, they just needed things. And then I thought I was like doing the work of the Lord. So I was just like, all right, I will get you whatever you need.
Oh man.
And then I had other people where it's just like, they just took advantage. Like a really close personal friend, like took advantage of my generosity really, really bad. And then like, we got in this really horrible argument and we haven't spoken since. So it's just like, it was a pretty wild ride, but like, one thing that's, I thought it was important, or I wanted to bring up, was the first thing that made me like think I was an atheist to myself. So I remember I was walking through church. I was like in middle school, like between 13 and 15, and thinking to myself that my experience in confirmation, so like I was in the Lutheran church and like reading the catechism over and over again, chanting it together in the group, like, I believe X, Y, Z, all of these things are true, like chanting that over and over and over again. Like, I'm walking through the hallway to myself thinking, it's just like, wow, I'm pretty sure this is literally exactly how the Hitler Youth became the Holocaust. Like, this type of indoctrination.
Oh, there's a wonderful quote on that actual concept that I heard recently, and it's basically like how you get people who don't think that there's how you get people who otherwise would not do horrible things to do something horrible. If I were to ask you, if I paid you a sum of money right now, would you put your best friend under a knife? Would you start cutting them up? Your answer, your like go-to knee-jerk answer is almost always going to be no, or maybe more specifically how much money. But let's not get into that one. That one's a bit messy. However, the argument that I've heard here is, in reality, outside of sum of money, all that it takes for you to think that it's worth it to cut someone up is to think that you're a surgeon. Because as soon as you think that you're a surgeon, when you are cutting someone, you are doing it for the greater good, even if in some cases, in reality, you may not be doing something for the greater good, like bloodletting of years past. Look at how George Washington died. So if you take your Hitler Youth was your example, how did the Hitler Youth go into this to suddenly the Holocaust? Well, all they decided was that all it took for them to cut someone up was that they were surgeons, and they were ultimately doing something for the greater good. Everybody is it's not a nuanced concept to say that everybody could possibly be a horrible person given the right circumstances. My argument is that the only circumstance required is for you to think that it's going to bring out some good.
Yeah.
Cut someone as long as you think you're a surgeon.
For sure. John, we are out of time for this call now, but I just want to say thank you so much for calling and telling me about your experiences and that I at least played a small role in some of that. I feel really good about that, and I'm just really happy that I can be a part of something positive in your life. So thanks again for calling.
Well, I would like to say just one last quick thing. Like, the main reason I wanted to call in is just like, I wanted to say out loud that I personally identify as an atheist, and like have someone hear that and not think it's crazy, because like with where I live now, like I would not tell, like I don't want people to know that.
Yeah.
Like I think it's a good idea.
I get it. Yeah. Well,
like, that's like really upsetting.
Guess what? You just said it.
Like,
no, it's not pathetic. It's
upsetting.
Upsetting. I'm sorry. I thought you said pathetic. Yeah, listen, you said it to me. You said it to Cyrus. You said it to everyone here in the audience tonight, and everybody watched at home. It's going to be recorded forever. So there you go. You said it. I'm happy for you, man. I'm rooting for you. So
maybe one day I'll call it with my real name.
You'll call in, and then you'll be like, hey, guess what? I'm a Christian now. Psych. That was just a phase.
Well, thank you. Thank you very much.
You're welcome,
Have
John.
A good day, Dan.
You too.
Is it Cyrus?
This is Cyrus.
Cyrus
the skeptic.
All right.
Definitely check him out. John,
right,
thanks
thank
again.
you, gentlemen. Have a wonderful evening.
You too. We'll talk to you later. Man, what a roller coaster that call was, right?
It seems to me that like when I come on, you don't get all the Christian arguers.
Cyrus, we've had some dang calls when you've been on. Like, it's been some good stuff.
Like the first time that I came on, it was all the polytheists calling in.
It was all the
and I'm just like, I'm so glad that the person who co-hosts the show with a polytheist happens to be the one here.
Just because it was the Yuletide season, you know? So all the polytheists, I don't know. Anyway, okay, so like, just before we go, we have one more call here that I want to take, but I just want to break this down like real quick. Like, the stories that he's telling me about people taking advantage of it, man, that lights me up. You know, I mean, people ask me sometimes why I do this show. People outside of that I know that are atheists, you know, because they want to trust that my motives are good, right? They want to know if I'm like trying to convert people to something. And look, people believe things that hurt them, right? And that is evidence of it right there. And so if I can be a part of someone's process, and so that they aren't harmed by their beliefs anymore, then I want to be a part of that, right? Like, I want to contribute to the conversation, help people rethink what they're doing, because the consequences, as he found out, they do matter, right? People do take advantage of you. You know, eventually bills got to be paid off, and life hits you hard. And when you don't have a fairy godmother or a god or some sort of force guiding your life anymore, then it hits you real hard. And I don't want people to figure that out the hard way. Yeah, I'd rather people figure it out through having conversations like this, right? So
when people self-actualize and have their identity tied very strongly to their religion, sometimes losing that, it's a lot like, and I'm not trying to frame this in an overtly negative way, but it's a lot like having an addiction to something and then quitting cold turkey. It is nightmarishly hard, and then in many ways you end up trying to replace what you were addicted to with something else. I know that it's not a perfect one-to-one comparison, because these are not, both of these concepts are not overtly negative, but it does seem like it echoes a little bit, where there's like, sometimes it's the aspect of community that's missing and people seek out community elsewhere. Sometimes it's the aspect of like fulfillment that they get from there. Like, oh, my life has purpose because I'm being guided by X, Y, and Z. And
we didn't even talk about love bombing. You know, like, love bombing is a thing. That's what
true, but that's a little more culty. That's a little more culty.
But I mean, like, it's normal for a place to be welcoming and stuff like that. But to prey on people's emotional vulnerability specifically because of specific situations, like, that happens too. And it sounds like that's what's happened to him. right? He went to a service and he was emotionally supported at a time where he wasn't normally getting that, and so he kind of wanted more of that, like anybody would. But anyway, I'm so glad, Josh. I'm so glad you got to call back to the show and we got to hear back, because that makes my day, makes my week. I mean, that's the stuff. That's the reason why I do this stuff right here. I want to get to our last call for tonight. Let's go to Jake in Washington. Jake, how are you doing?
Hello, doing good. Hello, Dan and Cyrus.
Yes, you are live with Dan and Cyrus on Truth Wanted. Jake, what can we do for you?
It's good to talk to you again. I called in last week, but I was listening to the call you had, I think it was the first call, about pragmatism, and I had some thoughts I just wanted to share and get your take on.
Yeah, share those thoughts.
Yeah, so I have kind of for a long time been very against pragmatism, the idea that what is useful should be a value above what is true. And that is because I think that truth should be the ultimate priority, because literally
the truth should be wanted,
is
what you're saying. It needs to be wanted.
The truth should be wanted.
Got it. Just wanted to clarify. Just want to make sure.
Like this show's name.
Yeah. Okay.
Exactly.
Just clarifying.
Well, and the reason for that is because all of our decisions and everything we feel, all of our perspectives is based on our perspective of what the truth is, like what reality is.
Yep.
So I think that if someone holds a belief that is not true, then it will necessarily do some form of damage in certain areas in their lives.
I don't know about necessarily.
Always, depending on
So the contention I would hold, and granted, I don't necessarily comport with the pragmatic theory of truth, but I think the idea that there are going to be some negatives to believing in something based on it not comporting with reality, I agree that can happen. I don't agree that necessarily will happen, and I would also say that maybe, again, this is the pragmatism me speaking, but we don't view these things in whether or not there are some negative consequences. We usually view these things in whether or not there is a net gain or a net loss, a net positive or a net negative. So if there's a bunch of negative stuff that happens as a result of a belief, that negative stuff can come from it being true or false. And positive things can come from a true or false belief. What we really have to evaluate is if you're dealing with strictly pragmatic theory of truth, what you have to evaluate is the net gain or net loss, not whether or not there are certain individual aspects that are good or bad.
Well, and I believe that if someone does not hold truth as their ultimate priority over usefulness, then in the long run, it will necessarily lead to damage. And I think that if people as a whole, as a society, valued the truth above all else, that we could eventually eliminate most, if not all, of the suffering in the world.
You know what I think, Jake? I think that people do value truth more than what you and I might think, but their way of getting to truth might not be the best way, and what they understand as truth isn't.
And not to mention, there's a couple of things to unpack with the truth claim. So it can be argued that even from a pragmatic point, what is true would ultimately be what leads to more useful and practical application. Again, unless we're talking something like politics, because there are some politicians that view lying as infinitely more useful. But the reason that you can have a kind of
Jake, you gotta get it.
That's a lovely sound.
Yeah.
The reason there's a lot of nuance in this is when we're talking about pragmatism. Pragmatism is a very recent philosophy, if we're comparing it to other philosophical positions. 1870s, you've got where the movement really began as the pragmatic maxim. I can't remember who fucking did it. Sorry for language. But then
that was his name. He made the
it was not. Oh, it was Charles Sanders. Sorry.
Okay.
It was not Max. A guy named Max. He was Pragmatic Max.
Pragmatic.
But then there were other people who ended up building on his base idea of pragmatism. John Dewey and William James, both built on that in the 20th century. But none of these philosophers, like these three people, never agreed with what each other thought about pragmatism. They never agreed with one another. They had conflicting views on how this epistemology should function, and that's kind of one of the reasons why you can have a really nuanced position that still comports with pragmatism, like truth ultimately being more useful than anything else, because what is true will lead to more useful applications. I think that's Dewey's school of thought more than anything. But because there's
I have an
these
argument on that too.
what's up? Okay, cool.
No, it's heating up. Go
Well,
for it, Jake.
The truth is always better than falsehood, because if you hold a true belief, that is the only way that you can create a plan to action based on what is actually true. If you hold beliefs that are not true, then your plans to action will be based on faulty beliefs. So it's possible that based on faulty beliefs, you could create a plan to action that works out for you in the end, but you will have a better likelihood of getting a good plan based on true beliefs.
Okay, and again, if we're going at, if somebody in my chat is more familiar with Dewey's writings than me, please let me know. But if memory serves, this is from Dewey's thought. That's in line with how I believe John Dewey viewed pragmatism, is that the more useful and more likely beneficial outcomes would come from something being true first. And it's one of the reasons why he would pursue truth, because it was pragmatic to pursue it.
So his view is that, well, then that's not really pragmatism, is it? Because pragmatism is what is useful is more valuable than what is true. But his view would be that what is true is more valuable than what is useful, because what is useful.
Well, so pragmatism isn't, if we're using just a broad sense, again, there's three like main schools of philosophy on pragmatism, and they all disagree with one another. So saying pragmatism is one thing automatically shows a problem with how one's viewing pragmatism, because pragmatism is not one thing. Pragmatism is many contradictory, competing ideas.
Okay.
You'd think it would be more pragmatic to have one definition of pragmatism.
You think it would.
Agree with that.
You know what I mean?
But in a broad sense, pragmatism is just an approach that assesses the truth value of a theory or belief in terms of its practical application. That's not saying that the usefulness of something is more important than the truth. It's saying that the truth value would comport with its practical application.
Well, how I usually hear people use it is in saying, like, in a response to, if you're having a debate with somebody about Christianity or about, like, believing in psychic powers or something, in my experience, usually people will bring up pragmatism in order to say, like, well, it doesn't really matter what's true because this is useful to me, and that's more important than what is actually true, is what's more useful to me.
And that is a fair criticism, but that's a criticism of someone's personal idea of usefulness, not the epistemology of pragmatism. But I do understand that contention, and I agree, because ultimately there's a huge issue with pragmatism, and that issue is that what is seen as useful is always going to come down to what the end goal is. So, for instance, if somebody's end goal is glorification of God, like this is an evangelical thing, like glorifying God is above everything else, right? If that's their end goal, then even under pragmatism, literally everything must be done for the glory of God, because it's useful towards the end goal to do that. That would be my contention, using pragmatism there. Not that they're saying that belief in something is more important. It's asking, well, what is that belief in the end goal? If that belief is to glorify their God, that's all they want to do. It's kind of hard to argue somebody out of that position in that way. But if there are other things that are entailed by that, for instance, I think that the world, if somebody says, I think the world would be a better place if more people were Christian, or if people are Christian, or people believe in Christian values, then you can kind of point to some Christian values that aren't necessarily useful, just keeping them within that frame. there are Christian beliefs that are not useful towards building a better functioning society. For instance, take the NIFB as an example. Their particular, not using them as the litmus test for Christianity, but their particular views on Jewish people, on homosexuals, on any stuff like that.
On you.
On me, yeah, putting my face on a thing and firing a gun at it repeatedly, yeah, that's a thing on me. Like their views on that are not. They're not useful to creating a society that's cohesive, that contains multiple different types of people. It's only useful insofar as creating a society with only one type of person who lives in an echo chamber. And in that case, you have to ask, well, is it useful to even create a society that's nothing but an echo chamber? I'd argue that it's not. But again, all of that's not a criticism so much of the epistemology. It's just people's personal usage.
Right. Yeah, I find that usually, at least my take on it, I could be wrong, but I think that usually people who are making the argument that, well, what is valuable to me is more important than what's true, have never really tried looking at things from a different angle than that and seeing how that affects them over kind of a longer period of time.
Mm-hmm. I find it to be a hasty justification for a belief.
If somebody just says, like, believing in God is useful to me, and like, well, yeah, it's useful to you, but it's useful to you in what end? Like, what are the actual ends of it?
And maybe this is, the conversations that I've had with that I've had with other people is like they didn't have a reason until I just asked them at that point. And then they came up with that. Like that. No, seriously. Like I think that's what happens.
I think in a lot of ways they do. Like a lot of times they're either going to have one, and this is not me trying to like throw all Christians under the bus, but a lot of times they'll have A or B, the one they pulled out of their butt immediately, or probably what also happens sometimes is they'll pull the one their pastor told them to say.
Or they realize in that moment that the reason that they had previously thought wasn't as good, so they search for another one. You know what I mean?
They go, I'm not really confident in this one. Maybe maybe I need to say something better, something that makes me sound a little smarter. And it's like, the thing you pulled out of your butt did not sound smarter.
You're exactly right, because it's like, okay, like saying that I prayed and then I found my car keys. Well, that sounds kind of dumb out loud. Maybe if I say, well, it's because of this, if you take the Bible into context, or if you do this, and then, you start to come up with these kinds of justifications and stuff. I think that's a lot more common. Because
a lot of post hoc rationalization.
Yeah, because not everybody's. I certainly wasn't an apologist. I didn't even know what apologetics was till I was at least a teenager. So
I wasn't aware, and this is weird because I'm in like obviously in the nerd community, which I would argue has just as many apologists as the religious communities do.
Here's the thing: your knowledge of truth is entirely justified by how many anime posters are in your room.
There's actually more than the camera shows, right?
Yeah. Oh, I bet, dude. So like, you're the most honest, most truthful person right now. That's how that. Look at that, beautiful.
There's more over there and over there. There's one lone poster.
That's not a room. That's a shrine.
Well, it's also a studio. So it's many things.
You should call the National Park Service and see if you can get like a certificate so that you're protected by the national government.
Can I be protected from falling trees? Because I've already had one room destroyed by one. It's right behind me.
It's on national park property. It might get done a bit faster than you do yourself. You wouldn't have to pay for it at least. It'd be
that would actually be super useful. That'd be great.
Think about it. I completely derailed from what we were talking about. I completely forgot what we were supposed to. You were talking about the nerd community and like
how I wasn't aware of what apologetics were, even though I was a young Earth creationist and in part of the nerd community, which I would argue are two areas that have the most usage of apologetics. And if you don't believe me on the nerd community thing, just look at any PlayStation versus Xbox argument.
Yes.
And it's literally just each side either engaging in apologetics for their side or engaging in whataboutism for the other side.
Oh, geez. You brought me back there.
That's it. That's all it is.
This is a very nostalgic episode today. We're talking about 2006 again, I think. Xbox versus PS3, which one's better?
But it does seem like maybe we've derailed a bit too far away from Jake's original point.
Enough is what it is. No, but seriously, Jake, like I do want to kind of start to wrap things up here in a bit, but like was this conversation been useful? Like, do you have any other counterpoints you want to make, or just like anything else you want to add?
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
And I appreciate your guys' takes on that. It's been good. Really like the show.
Yeah.
And I'll call it back again in the future. But yeah, just again, I think that it's really important to emphasize the value of truth, because it's. I think that if you look like throughout human history, a lot of the suffering that's been caused is because people did not kind of collectively value truth as an ultimate priority. And I think that in a secular society we're trying to build, I think that would be the most important value for people to have. You know, because if we're all collectively trying to find the truth above all else, and then everything else is beneath that value, because that is how it works. You know, that is how our minds work. That's how reality works. What we believe is true kind of precedes everything else. So if we're consciously seeking that out, I think that's the most important thing.
Yeah, this is how the Enlightenment started. You know what I mean? Like
if everybody had the same base axioms and those axioms were all positive, then I agree. Society would be better, but unfortunately, not everybody has the same base axioms.
Yeah, so like there are societies and cultures even today where it's like, your duty to family or your duty to God or your duty to religion like is the most important in your life. So, yeah, I think there's some merit to that. Really interesting. Jake, thanks again for calling, and I look forward to more conversations with you, bud.
Of course. Thank you, guys.
Yeah, see you later. Man. I look, I'm still holding you to it, man. Most posters in your room, that's it. You're the... You can post. I mean, you could tell me about some sort of obscure fact about Neon Genesis Evangelion, and I would just believe it.
Yeah, the fact that the last 2 episodes were actually built as a product of budget cuts, and they made movies afterwards when they had enough money.
I don't know. Hey,
like you just pulled a random anime out, but I happen to know about the production behind that one.
Alienated 90% of our audience now, Cyrus. Thanks.
Oops.
Thanks. Yeah. Fans of Truth Wanted also correspond in the Venn diagram of fans of Neon Genesis Evangelion. Yeah, I think that the YouTube algorithm certainly will pick that up.
Hey, strangely enough, I have actually had people send me screenshots of their YouTube recommendations, and it has actually shown my channel in recommended anime recommendations, even though there is no reason that should be the case.
No, sirs. There is a reason. There's a reason. There's a reason for everything, sirs. Don't you believe that? There's a reason for everything.
Oh, don't do this. Don't do this to me. Are you willing to walk down this rabbit hole? Because this is a long one.
To walk down this rabbit hole. Sirs, thanks so much for being on the show tonight. Where can people find you at?
People can find me at youtube.com/SirSkeptic on YouTube. You can also find me on Twitter. Again, at SirSkeptic there. I do videos every day, except for the weekends, and I do video game live streams that are usually just a chance for me to hang out with fans. But actual like atheist content, political content stuff, that's all my Monday through Friday stuff. In fact, actually, as soon as we are done with this show, I'm going to be starting another stream dealing with what the Biblical Gender Roles website, what their take is on the pastor. The pastor who was in Tennessee, who was on the police force.
I'm not sure if I heard this story.
There was a pastor who happened to actually be an NIFB pastor who was on the police force in Tennessee as a detective, and he was saying things about how like the police should be allowed to arrest people for the mere like crime of being gay. Like they should be able to grab people from the street corner and do it. And then he ended up an entire investigation ended up being launched into him because he was saying these things, and he's like, no, my faith is separate from my job. And I'm like, your claims about your faith literally were that the police should be allowed to do these things. This is not separate from your job. But anyway, I've covered the pastor once or twice when that was happening, but I wasn't aware until very recently that Biblical Gender Roles actually wrote an article on the pastor thing, and then ended up framing it in like Imagine what would happen in a world where pastors are taken from the pulpit for believing in Jesus Christ. In a world where this happens, your basic freedom of speech is being alienated. Like that's literally the thing that the spin that BGR is taking on this. I'm just like, you know what? I have to do a live stream Friday, and it's gonna be on this. It has to be on this.
That's if you're wondering why YouTube categorizes you as anime, it's that voice right there.
It's that voice.
Yeah. I guess I should have heard about this. I'm surprised that I didn't. But yeah, okay. So that's a pre-game for some of Cyrus's content if you want to go check him out. For those of you who are joining in for me the first time, this is Truth Wanted. This is a live call-in show that happens every Friday at 7 p.m. Central Time. It is live. You can always call in. But in case you missed it tonight, you can catch this show on YouTube, Spotify, iTunes, wherever you get your podcasts. We also have a email address that you can get me at. It is truth@atheist-community.org. I read all the emails you guys send, and I love it when you guys do. So please send me more of that. Tell me what you think of the show. Tell me your thoughts, ideas, how to improve it. Hey, we're working on getting some merch, and I know I've said that before, but we're legit actually working on getting some merch for the show. So if you want a t-shirt, if you want a hat, I think that's all we're looking at right now. But let me know. And maybe we can put you guys on a list or something to let you guys know, like be the first ones to kind of get that stuff and purchase it. You can also find me on Twitter. Oh, there's our crew at the back. Thank you guys for the
Hi, Yumi.
this single week. They are super awesome. They help make this show a great thing. And if you want to support this show and keep making it a great thing, you can donate on patreon.com/truthwanted. I do not receive any of that money. That all goes here to the ACA to help make this show and other productions better. And hey, look, by the way, if you're going through like a shitty financial situation and stuff right now, okay, and like stuff isn't great, don't donate to this show, okay? I'm not going to be the person that take advantage of anybody's money like that. Do your thing, man. Like, keep up with you first. But if you do enjoy like the free content that comes out through here and you want to support it, definitely do that. And you can also find this group on the Truth Wanted Facebook group, as well as sometimes you can find me on Discord as well. Look at that cat. It's so beautiful. Gosh, you listeners at home that are seeing this live feed, you're missing on a beautiful, beautiful cat. It really is great. But yeah, we're also on Discord on the Atheist Community of Boston Discord. You can find us there. I believe that's all the links and plugs that I have tonight. Cyrus, is there anything you want to say before we wrap things up tonight?
Is there anything that I want to say? So I would like to say that I have enjoyed this greatly, even though this was as impromptu as possible.
Hell yes.
But I do love you, Dan. And if anybody, I've been simulcasting this onto my channel as well. If you are on my channel and you are not subscribed to Truth Wanted, please do so. I will go ahead and send you guys out a link as well so that you can. And if you actually, all things considered, I'm going to go ahead and drop a link right in the chat right now. If you are on my channel and you have not subscribed to Truth Wanted, please do so immediately. The link is there for you to click, and I'll be watching their sub count on Social Blade. I'll be tracking you guys. I'm kidding. I'm not going to do that.
Well, I mean, you could.
I could. I do have a small shout out, and the shout out, I guess, is just because my chat has been telling me to show the real Cyrus. So
the real Cyrus. That's an in joke that you're going to have to figure out by subscribing to Cyrus's channel and figuring out what there. Cyrus, thanks again for this impromptu last minute appearance on the show. And thank you everybody who's been watching this live. And those of you listening at home, as always, keep wanting the truth, and I'll see you next time.